Thank you again to the Foundation. Thank you for the Foreign Ministry for helping us putting this together. And it's a great pleasure to have you here. I think there are lots of questions we can address. I'm sure the audience would also be very interested in exchanging views and learning more from your experience and your views. You know, how do we got here? Where do we go from here to how do we get out of here? Mm-hmm. So let's start maybe with 10-15 minutes by each of you, mm-hmm. You know, gathering your views and your analysis of the current situation and your ideas, and then we can maybe follow up with a short dialogue, and then we will collect questions from the audience and bring it to a close. So, Natalia, the floor is yours. Thank you for coming. Mm-hmm. Please.
Muchas gracias. Lo siento, no hablo español. Me gusta español mucho. Yes, thank you so much. Really, it's such a pleasure to be here. Thank you for the Foundation to host us these several days. We already feel ourselves here at home. Like, really good to come here. Already like third time. It's really great, and it's my first visit to Madrid. The city absolutely amazing. People absolutely amazing. Thank you to the Foreign Ministry also for such a good support and help and solidarity with us. It's really great to be here. When we were discussing all these days that how much similarities we have between Russia and Spain, and how much, again, how rich both countries are in terms of history and culture, and such a pity that the times is like it is, and while it's really great, amazing here, like, and why Russia couldn't be like Spain, like why couldn't we develop what is best, our people, our, again, everything, like we are a country of great musicians and writers and poets, and instead of that, now we are known as a country of aggressor, of war criminals, of hackers, and it's like absolutely not what we all would like to see, and it's much better to be proud of your country instead of being embarrassed. And what is happening now, especially with all this aggression generally by the Kremlin, but of course this aggression against Ukraine since 2014, but especially last year with this full-scale invasion, it's the worst possible scenario for the entire world. Huge tragedy for Ukraine and Ukrainians, and also absolutely catastrophic disaster for Russia. And but please know that there are a lot of Russians that don't support the war, that are still very brave inside the country and continue resistance. And we as a foundation support those who are still doing that, and of course those who are in exile. Unfortunately, many of us had to flee Russia. I was one of the first of those who had to flee Russia in 2012. Those were quite vegetarian times, but there was an attack against those who were participating in rallies of protest, on Bolotnaya case activists, those who didn't want Putin to become president again, and also against those who were working for democracy promotion organizations like me. Back then, in December of 2012, under gunpoint with some bruises, I was explained that I have basically 48 hours to pack and leave, otherwise I would be in jail for 20 years for state treason, just because I wanted democracy and freedom in my own country. But of course, the first like several days was shocking experience. It seemed like life is over. But my first country of exile was Lithuania, and there I understood that activism doesn't end with borders. I could be active anywhere. I could continue fighting for this free and democratic Russia, normal Russia, civilized Russia from any location. And after I relocated IRI office, my previous organization, from Moscow to Vilnius and then to Warsaw, I resigned from IRI, moved to the United States, to California first, and it's a place where this idea of Free Russia Foundation appeared. Then I moved to Washington, D.C., and I just started like from scratch, from my kitchen table back then in California, just one of me. Then the second person joined, then more people joined. Now we are a very powerful, big movement. that based in so many countries. Our first regional office was in Kiev, Ukraine, and despite the name Free Russia Foundation, we still have an office in Kiev. We work a lot with Ukrainians, helping Ukraine, doing a lot of things. Our first and still, unfortunately, one of the biggest programs is to help Ukrainian hostages held by the Kremlin regime in Russian jails. And then we started to help also Belarusian activists because we already were helping a lot of Russian exiled activists. And so we have this program. And on Russia, now we are in many countries. Our second headquarters is now in Brussels. And we have offices in Tallinn, Vilnius, Berlin, in Montenegro, Budva, and in Tbilisi. So many places. In 2019, the Russian government designated Free Russia Foundation as an undesirable organization. So anybody who is inside Russia continue working with us, they can be in jail. And one of such people, unfortunately, our former president, vice president Vladimir Milov, who just recently in April was sentenced to 25 years in jail. And first sentence was for telling the truth about the war in Ukraine, and also for working with an undesirable organization, and this new state treason, which is now life sentence. So the cost for speaking freely, for telling the things as they are, calling this war the war, it's very, very dangerous. But despite that, Russians do protest, don't believe any information that everybody supports only Putin and the Kremlin supports the war. No, it's not true. Of course, there are a lot of people like that, a lot of people who are zombified by this 24/7 propaganda for over 20 years. But at the same time, a lot of brave people in so many regions. We have an organization, human rights organization, that monitors political prosecution in Russia over day and for. According to them, there were only 25 days since the full-scale invasion when no Russian was inside Russia was detained for anti-war protest. So it means almost every day protests are happening in this or that region. All these protests are, of course, underreported because since the full-scale invasion, all the independent media outlets were forced out from Russia. They are now in exile. A lot of civil society organizations, a lot of activists, human rights defenders, many of them continue their work outside of the country, including here in Spain, and thank you for your hospitality and helping those people. Again, a lot of activity. Trend is that more and more people are dissatisfied, are very disappointed with what is happening, where Russia is going. A lot of people waking up, still maybe not as fast as we all would like to, but still they're doing that. Russians do a lot, many Russians do a lot to support Ukraine, to help Ukraine. I told you the example of my organization. We have I'll finish very soon, but just so that you know, yes, that we have always been a do tank, those who are helping activists in many, like Russian activists, Belarusian activists, and so on. We are also a think tank. We do a lot of research, including repressions inside Russia, propaganda inside Russia, but also malign influence of Kremlin here in the West. One of the reports we released in 2019, it was called Misrule of Law, how the Kremlin chooses open Western democracies and abuses institutions and processes. Here, one of the chapters was devoted to Spain. And yes, so when we do that a lot. But like overnight, on February 24th, 2022, we had to immediately become a humanitarian organization. So I have never thought that I'll be acting like, I don't know, Red Cross or some other organization, evacuating Ukrainians from Kiev, from Zaporozhye, from Kramatorsk to the Polish border. We saved over 10,000 people, about 100 cats, 100 dogs, 3 snails. One 9-year-old boy was carrying his 3 snails in a jar. And of course, all of that is very heartbreaking, and it's terrible, shouldn't be happening. But at the same time, this regime made a suicidal mistake by invading Ukraine like they did. Now it's clear for everybody, for the entire world, that just the situation cannot be like that. And we all know, history teaches us all dictatorships eventually fall. And we pro-democracy Russians, we are the ones who are committed to making Russia a normal country. What we are discussing, we want to be a very boring country, so that we, like, I don't know, the biggest scandal, maybe the doping scandal at the Olympic Games or something like that. Even there are so many negative scenarios about how it all can develop. We cannot afford to believe nothing like only in democracy. Democracy in Russia is the only guarantee of sustainability of Ukraine's victory. It's the only guarantee of stability and security in the region. It's something we all need, we all want. Russia, because the current Russia under Putin is such a disruptor, such a like evil thing, and so we are very thankful to everybody who understands and supports Ukraine. Supporting Ukraine is also supporting Russian pro-democracy movement, because again, we are the ones who can guarantee that this will be a better place. We can talk more about our programs, about the situation inside Russia, about how a lot of activists are now in exile and how this movement is getting stronger and bigger and what plans we have. But let my colleague Vladimir talk more. Mm-hmm.
Okay, this is great. Maybe I have also some questions for you, but I think it's better now to listen to you, and then we can start the conversation. Vladimir, please.
Thank you. I'll try to be as brief as possible. It's great to be here. Madrid is a fabulous city. Yes. It's definitely not my first time here, but it's not really easy to enjoy on the background of the tragedy that is unfolding. And you cannot imagine what also this tragedy is for us, because many Russians always had deep and passionate love and affection towards Ukraine and Ukrainians. We have been so gifted to have this brilliant, talented nation as our neighbors, and it's unimaginable what Putin is doing to destroy it. I come from energy industry as a background, and you know that since the Soviet times, there was a disproportionate share of ethnic Ukrainians in oil and gas and electricity, like Viktor Muravlenko, the founder of Western Siberian oil fields and the oil field development Tsar, he was ethnic Ukrainian. There's a monument dedicated to him in Tyumen region, the main oil producing region. And Pyotr Neporozhny, who was the electricity minister under Khrushchev and Brezhnev, effectively the creator of Russian electricity system as we know it, also was ethnic Ukrainian. So when Russian energy sector folks drink some vodka, they don't sing "God Save the Tsar," they sing "Ty zh меня подманула." So as a matter of fact, there was always this deep affection for Ukrainian people and Ukrainian culture. So what Putin is doing, I mean, he claims it to be in the name of the Russian nation, but that is not true. And we want you to know that that is not true. It's a very hard question of how did we get here. I would say the short answer will be that authoritarian power grabs happen very quickly. You get mousetrapped overnight. And as a matter of fact, you may not even notice. It's not like somebody comes and say, we scrap democracy, I'm a dictator now. No, it never happens like that. You just change the way the judges are appointed slightly. You change the way the upper chamber of parliament is convened slightly. You take one television channel under control, but people say we still got some others, and sort of step by step, like bang, your mouse trapped. And also, it's important to understand that this is what we told back in 2000s to Bush, Blair, Prodi, Barroso. We would say lawlessness and human rights abuses would not end up at home. They will be exported. So there will come a time when Putin consolidates enough power, he will go after other countries. So later it happened in Georgia, it happened in 2014 in Ukraine, and it ended up with the tragedy that we are seeing right now. So free people of the world should always be on high alert. When some strongman leader who claims to be more perfect than all these dysfunctional democratic institutions try to consolidate just a little bit more power, this is not somebody else's problem. This is our mutual problem. When a strongman authoritarian leader abuses human rights at home, that is a sign that we're just few steps away from him exporting that behavior. And we see that with many autocrats. Like, look who are the troublemakers in different parts of the world, and look who is supporting Hezbollah and all the other, actors in the Middle East who are stirring the situation in Syria, Lebanon, Yemen. Look who is swallowing Hong Kong and threatening Taiwan. So that's a pretty similar pattern across the world. So free people of the world should be always on high alert when this is happening. And again, I don't want to make this a long lecture. I will just say a few words about the people of Russia who are finding themselves in an extremely difficult position right now. They really lived also brainwashed and detached from reality by more than 20 years of propaganda. I always use this example. Mind you that the last major television channel was taken under control by Putin 22 years ago. Imagine all, this big crowded room of dedicated Democrats being put into one room for 22 years, no going out, only one television screen, which only says one thing. What's the likelihood that getting out after 22 years you will be repeating it? So this is actually how it went, but a lot of responsibility is onto the shoulder of people of Russia, obviously, because they've been detached from reality for too long, but they were not silent. They also protested a lot. And this actually throughout Russian history. This is something that unfortunately often come unnoticed, but for hundreds of years, various times and occasions, we have been protesting. So what Putin did, he always elevated the scale of repressions in response. First, when we began winning elections, he banned us all from elections. Then we organized the major street protest movement demanding free and fair elections. He started to jail people. Then when our movement became so big and successful that we challenged him in his presidential run, he jailed or exiled all of us and declared us extremists. If only we had a free and fair election contest 5 years ago in 2018 when my friend Alexei Navalny tried to run and was banned, we probably would not have been here now. Because the protest movement was already significant, visible, and you saw it on the streets. And very important, the major protest movement that was visible on the streets of Russia in the past few years before the recent crackdown carried no imperialist slogans. It carried a lot of Ukrainian flags, Georgian flags, flags of Belarus. In our speeches at these rallies, all of us expressed deep sympathy for our neighboring sovereign nations in their European, Euro-Atlantic aspirations, and full respect for a sovereignty and desire to live in normal, peaceful, free, democratic European space, which is also why Putin hates us. He hates this different image and vision of what Russia could be and will be one day, however difficult. But we'll be happy to tell you more about what we're doing to get there. But this heart is beating. This other normal, peaceful, responsible Russia exists. And we try our best, work hard to make sure so that one day you will see it as a reality.
Thank you. Let's get into questions. And I was thinking before we move into what the opposition can do, both from within and from outside Russia, I wanted to go directly into the question of, given this, the brutality of the punishment which dissidents face in Russia, both inside and outside. When we see the trajectories of, as you say, Karamurza, Nemtsov, Navalny, or Khodorkovsky, the price is so high. Is it then the way to bring democracy back to Russia, mostly the only way, a military defeat? Is this the way that will bring democracy back to Russia? Does Putin have to lose militarily in order to be able, like it happened in 1979 in Afghanistan, or like many other empires or authoritarian regimes have faced, that this is the true only way or the most important element that would produce that result?
Ukrainian military victory will be essential for bringing down Putin's dictatorship. And I mean, not only for that, but we all need this because we need the free world to defend itself against barbaric aggression and attempts to brazenly redraw international rule-based order. So everybody all the people of the free world need it. I'm not sure that Ukraine restoring full control of its currently occupied territories will be sufficient to bring Putin's regime down, which means we still need to work with the population inside Russia to actually ignite it to speak up. Could not, I mean, if Putin is, let me put it very simply, the formula is this: if Putin is not challenged at home, he will replenish, regroup, and strike back. He or whoever of his crazy junta succeeds.
And not only Ukraine, but...
So we need to ignite this domestic resistance, which I would say it's not contradictory. I'd say it's mutually assistive, intertwined. They go together. Ukrainian resistance and fight for their victory, and Russians rising up and fighting for their victory of freedom over dictatorship.
I completely agree. Ukraine's victory is a very important thing. It's a very fair thing because, again, when you are being attacked and that brutally, of course, it's symbolic for everybody that Ukraine wins on Ukraine's conditions, returning all its occupied territories and Crimea and all of it. This, again, as Vladimir said, it won't be enough. Only for us, pro-democracy Russians, our very big battlefield will be for the values of the Russian society. Because right now it's a very unhealthy society, again, zombified by this 24/7 propaganda for so many years. It's a lot of work with the population, with people to explain everything to them. As Vladimir said, propaganda has such a big and huge effect, and actually this was a very smart thing that Putin did. The very first thing that he did, it was media capture. This is how he started to get more and more power. And when we meet with any Western audience, we say, we're really great that you're living in a democracy, but please don't take democracy and freedom for granted. This is something you have to defend every day, every second. This is something people in many places in the world are dying for. And this is, again, in Russia, it wasn't overnight. It was a very creeping authoritarianism. Like we were, because there was this social agreement between the society and the Kremlin that you don't interfere politics, we'll take care of it, you just enjoy this profits every year, enjoy some personal freedoms. It was a huge benefit from us after the collapse of the Soviet Union to have, for example, the freedom to travel. It was so big. Or to be able to buy more stuff, all this consumerism boom was big. But just don't interfere politics, we'll take care of it. But then politics starts interfering and controlling you. So this is what happened. And just two examples of how propaganda works. One, we have friends who were fleeing from Kazakhstan because of their January events of last year. They were going through Turkey. When you are in any hotel in any country, when you turn on television, it's very the first thing is Russia Today or something like that. So they started to watch it. A week later, they think maybe Putin is right, maybe something is correct. But then they said why we are fleeing from this and we understand what's happening. No, we shouldn't even let's switch off television. That's why one of the biggest grassroots initiative now in Russia is print out internet, or some activists even cut television cables. And another example how propaganda can be undone. Vladimir Kormurza, again, we remembered about him. He's a historian, he's a journalist, he's a politician, and when he was in the camera with several cellmates, and when you turn on television, again, you don't have much choice, it's all propaganda channels. But he talking to people, those who were in the same cell, a small one, for several days, like on day 3rd or 4th, they already are turning from this propaganda channel to the only available channel that without propaganda is cultural channel, at least to listen to some music. So it can, like, we just need to work more with our people and they can explain. I think one of the biggest mistakes of the Kremlin was the World Cup, when Russians for so many years were saying, like, we're told, we are besieged, besieged country, yes, fortress, yes, everybody are enemies, all nations want just to destroy Russia, only Putin is our ambassador, defends our interests. But then there was this World Cup, and people saw so many people from so many countries just enjoying soccer, this competition, this talking. It was the time when many Russians saw for the first time some foreigner, and then they like understood that something is wrong with what I'm seeing with my own eyes, with like meeting all these different people from all different countries, and what they tell us on television.
And in that light, the strategy of Ukraine of partially and symbolically bringing the war into Russia by drones attacks into Moscow, by sabotage, by encouraging or tolerating partisans in Belgorod. Does this galvanize public opinion, or does it in fact show that the regime is not as strong as it claims and that the war is not going well? Is that something, which way does it work?
I can start.
Yeah, please, go and then.
Yes, I think it's important that such things are happening because, again, this is the war. If you're attacked, you also can be attacked, counterattacked. What is happening right now is that in many big cities in Russia, Moscow, St. Petersburg, but not only, in so many other big cities, for them, this is not the full-scale war. This is this limited military operation, as they think. They don't know much. They maybe don't read news that much. They are not being conscripted. Who is being sent to the war in Ukraine is it's basically the tax on poverty. It's the poorest regions of Russia, very often national republics. I myself from the Republic of Buryatia, and every 18th person who died in the war is from my place, and it's a very small republic, and Buryatia is a very small ethnicity. Russia is not only 11 time zone country, not only country of 80 plus regions, it's also a country of 190 ethnic minorities. And for many years, it was a deliberate policy of the Kremlin to impoverish region, to control all the financial flows. Again, no power in regions. Russian Federation is quite a Potemkin village. It's not federation. And again, many regions, not only national republics, but other poor regions, these people are being conscripted, especially from villages, and then it's not reported. So many people in, again, Moscow just continue to enjoy their life, go to the restaurants, they don't even know much. The more drones, the more like real war effects they see, of course, the more understanding they will be.
One of these drones, actually, which hit Moscow, hit the building which I know very well, Profsoyuzna in '98. We used to buy beer there when we were students. It was one of the first commercial stores that opened in the area, the southwest of Moscow, after the market reforms began. And actually, it's located in my district where I ran and was banned from election 3 times. If I wasn't banned in 2019, I would have been a member of the Moscow parliament from exactly that district, with these voters actually participating in that election. So I have some feedback. Most people in Russia have figured out already, before these incursions or drone attacks, that Putin has dragged us into a deep, deep trouble. So one of the sells that Putin was trying to make through this television is that this whole thing would just last 3 days, we capture Kyiv, and that is it. And right now we're in like absolutely uncharted waters, because here is the moment when people realize that they're mouse-trapped and they're incapacitated. They have no political rights. Suddenly they thought like things are okay, we can just work, earn money, buy things, and then and bang, you realize that you have no political rights. If you want to go protest, choose. We have a lot of amendments to criminal code in the recent years, so make your pick from the menu. You want to get 15 years in jail for extremism, or you want to get 15 years in jail for distributing fakes about the Russian military, which means telling the truth about the war. So we're beyond that point. I think people realize what is going on. Fascinating thing is that there was an article in Kommersant, Russian daily newspaper, which is printed in Russia, which is remarkable that these things go out still these days in Russia. A correspondent went into Belgorod region when this incursion happened by Russian units fighting on the Ukrainian side. And he talked to local residents in Graivoron, the district capital in Belgorod region. Again, Graivoron, 5 years ago at the presidential elections, voted 88% for Putin, 88%. And now, so he talks to people, and do you think that they say that, well, these Ukrainians, we will execute revenge, how they are shooting at us, making... No. A correspondent approaches and says, what do you think about what's going on? He says, if I tell you what I think, I'm going to get 10 years in jail. That is it. The other guy says, the whole leadership of the Russian Federation should be dragged here to live in this area for 1 year. Not where they live, but right here. In Graivoron, Kazinka, and other places. That's, I mean, you want to know what's going on, read it. That's a pretty remarkable article which was printed by a Russian correspondent right now in Russia, in the place which is being attacked. So you think there's some hatred towards Ukraine? No. It's pretty solid assessment of the situation, but people are incapacitated because of long years of authoritarian build-up, and essentially Putin's wartime cabinet, the body that is running the country now, is National Security Council, which meets every Friday. It's reported on the Kremlin's website, and actually discusses the key issues of war, domestic and foreign policy. It consists, for almost like 99%, of people who were never publicly elected, and most of them who have security or military background. It's a junta, basically. It's a classical military junta which grabbed power and was never elected by the people, and so the people begin to realize that there is a problem with that.
And you know, in terms of the diaspora, which is the other bit of Russians which are abroad, a huge number of people left like when the mobilization decree was passed, and was 250,000 or 750,000. The figures are kind of to Georgia, Kazakhstan, whatever. Were these people, you know, just living because war had kind of personally touched us, and they wanted to get rid of, you know, of course, you know, being mobilized, or have then ever since, you know, their attitudes changed and so on? Because I mean, the question is, when we look, and maybe it's a bit too early to see this, but we saw, for example, huge demonstrations across Europe of Iranians abroad, right? But this is, of course, you know, since 1979, you know, we have this regime, and there are whole generations, and there is an Iranian diaspora which is well organized and visible, and which demonstrates, you know, when and how do you think this can happen? What does it take, or what would it take to be able to organize this diaspora? Or is this diaspora also scared because maybe just one member of the family left, but the rest of the family is back home? You know, how and when would we see, or how could we support this diaspora to kind of emerge? Is this fear? Is this because they're pragmatical? Is this because they're cynical?
Yes.
How do you assess that?
Thank you so much. I told you that I was one of the very first in 2012 fleeing from Russia, and there were like dozens of us. Then, after the annexation of Crimea, invasion to eastern Ukraine, some more people left, like maybe hundreds now. After assassination of Boris Nemtsov near the Kremlin, more people left. And some other, like again, there were waves, so there were hundreds, thousands, more and more, hundreds of thousands. Now it's over 1 million at the very least. So like this exile from Russia, unfortunately, is growing. Of course, this is the biggest. 2021 was a very big year, because now we understand that Putin is fully preparing for the war at the full speed, and like in 2021 we were relocating a lot of Those who were working on infrastructural projects, a lot of, again, Navalny headquarters were destroyed, a lot of big organizations all across Russia, they were destroyed, a lot of journalists already started to leave Russia. And of course, as soon as full-scale invasion started, the first wave in March, it was those who, like human rights defenders, activists, journalists, and then the second big wave was after this mobilization started in September. Right now, yes, and there was a 1 year sad and tragic anniversary of this full-scale invasion. On this day, I was in Brussels, and it was a very big, yes, prior to that, a very big marching of Iranian diaspora, and people were also asking us. But yes, it took time for Iranian diaspora to strengthen, to grow. All these people now, what is happening with the Russians in exile, it's very hectic, they are stateless, they are homeless, they are not settled at all. There is no one media outlet or civil society organization that is settled in this or that country. Mostly what is happening is they have like 2 people in Prague, 3 people in Vilnius, 10 people in Tbilisi, 1 person somewhere in Spain, for example, and this is what happened. And they don't know if they're going to stay there. TV Rain, an independent internet television in Russia, they started their fleeing. They were in Turkey first, understanding that, yes, it's just a transit country. They are not safe there. They tried to do it in Georgia. Also not stable, not safe. They went to Latvia. Also couldn't stay there. Now they're in the Netherlands. And this is happening with many. We don't know. We don't know what's going to happen. Many countries help us give humanitarian visas, and so that people can leave and get relocated. But then there are no mechanism on the European level yet to have more permanent visas or work visas or something. It's very difficult path. So it takes time. Right now, again, more or less, it's becoming stabilized. Though there are a lot of people in transit locations in Central Asian countries, in Turkey, in Armenia, in Georgia. But again, in some countries, they are facing deportation back to Russia, or it's over a year now. All their stay permits are expiring. They don't know. Many passports are expiring, visas are expiring. They, again, very, very unstable. What we are trying to do, why I said that we have so many offices in many countries, we are trying to get them some resource centers so that they can come and work, and we give them legal assistance, like a social assistance, also a lot of educational programs, just make them stronger, make them do what they can do best, implement anti-war initiatives, help Ukrainians. 80% of people helping anti-war initiatives in Georgia, for example, it's Russians helping Ukrainians, and so on, and in many countries it's like that. Or do the YouTube and streaming, trying to target audiences inside Russia. They're doing it a lot, so they're working. It will take time. Now we see, and at first there was this demand to us, or from Western countries, why we don't see Russians protesting? Okay, it's very dangerous to protest inside the country. We understand you can be in jail for 10 years, 15 years for protests. Already a lot of people, over 20,000 people were detained, including 565 minors, people underage. And again, protests are happening almost every day. But we were told in many Western capitals, you are here now, why you are not protesting? First of all, many of us were thinking, it's brave and courageous to protest inside Russia. We are here now. Why to protest? We should do something. We should evacuate Ukrainians. We should do this initiative. We were not even thinking that protest outside should be even important. Now we understand it so that we should be visible. And so we started to organize these things. Estonia, for example, was a big critic of Russians, a very big supporter of Ukrainians. But then my team started to conduct rallies of protest every month. And when one protest, second, third, and fourth, and already Estonian politicians who were criticizing us before for being not visible, they started to say weekly protest of exiled Russians in front of the Russian embassy. We said not weekly yet, monthly, but thank you for noticing. We understand it's just for our visibility, but again, we are doing many things, helping Ukrainians, documenting war crimes, doing research of how all this corrupt money are coming to the West, how the Kremlin circumvents sanctions, many other things. So already this work is happening.
And there's a major rally scheduled for Sunday across the globe, including in Russia. So let's see what happens.
Okay, then let's move a bit also to the topic. You've been working a lot. I mean, I know you've done a political activist and so political parties, but in energy, this is something you know very close from. I remember I looked up at the figures, and the year before the invasion, the defense budget of Russia was at around 60 billion euros, and the exports from Russia to the EU were about 60 billion euros in energy. So it was kind of a very neat, comparison of how we were funding Russian military. Are sanctions working? Both, to damage the Russian economy. There is a big argument and a big debate about this, of course, because whether the statistics are fake or not, because we have big stories about fake tankers going around and all that kind of things. So what is your assessment of both kind of technically are they working, but also politically maybe again are they working in Russia to let people feel that there is a cost of the actions of Putin?
Yes, sanctions are working big time and are producing great effect, but it's mostly visible to people who understand things. So we need to go out with broader analysis and spreading this word around that they are pretty effective. What is also important about sanctions that their effect strongly progresses over time. So it was naive to expect that they will produce some serious results in the first few months, but now they're beginning to take a toll. Just Ministry of Finance reported that after the first 4 months of this year, federal budget deficit exceeded the planned deficit for the whole year by 17%. It's just in the first 4 months. Oil and gas revenue, January through April, was down 52% year on year. So this is working. All this stuff that you hear about the shadow fleet of tankers and Indian and Middle Eastern traders, yes, some of the murky Russians make money out of it, but the federal budget doesn't see it. Oil is taxed on FOB Novorossiysk when it's being shipped onto a tanker in a Russian port. So government does not see that revenue. And it's important that in the current system, everything is hanging only on one criteria, the ability of government to finance things. Because private investment is gone, capital flight from Russia went through the roof. Last year, we had $227 billion net capital flight from Russia. That's the absolute record since the collapse of the Soviet Union. We didn't have that large capital flight even in the 90s. A central bank is projecting continuing significant capital flight for all the years to come beyond the horizon. So investment is not coming. Remarkably, since the beginning of the full-scale invasion in February last year, no Chinese or Indian investments came, zero. Not a single investment entry. And total, so for some people this figure is shocking on the background of all this fuzz about Russia-China, Russia-India partnership. The total accumulated foreign direct investment by China in Russia is $3.5 billion, which is 0.00 something of a percent of the total FDI stock. Indian foreign direct investment in Russia is 600 million. Not billion, million, which is like, you need a very strong microscope to really see it. Russia is discovering a very, very interesting and inconvenient truth. For the past 3 or 4 decades, the collective West was our major donor. Anything from capital to technology to skill and whatever. So whatever was said about the West couldn't deny the fact that the West was major donor of our modernization. China and India and other countries of the global South are fundamentally not interested in being a donor of Russia. They only provide Putin some life support at best. And they see us as a major competitor in the manufacturing industries and global markets and so on. So it takes time, it takes patience. It's a big beast, which also accumulated a lot of reserves and some resilience since 2014. Like Russia developed some unique national system of financial messaging as an alternative to SWIFT. If it was cut off from SWIFT 9 years ago, that would have been real trouble. Now they sort of managing, because for 80 years they have been really preparing for this thing and so on. So sanctions are working, effects are tremendous. I mean, I can go on for hours about this, but they're working.
What else can we put on the table as
Enforcement.
in sanctions? Okay, yeah, that's
I think we're coming to the moment when enforcement and ensuring compliance is much stronger than any new possible sanctions, because here's where Putin has been very successful in the past year: circumvention. He restored imports to pre-war levels and even higher through third countries, Turkey, Central Asia, China. Yes, it's of worse quality and much more expensive because of logistics, so it's not really good. But we get stuff that the industry needs, consumer market needs, and so on. So enforcement is key. And mind you that American agency which monitors compliance, OFAC, Office of Foreign Assets Control, 250 people for all of the sanctions. Iran, North Korea, Venezuela, Syria, 250 people. European Union, 0 people. No agency monitoring compliance. I mean, sorry, you can't go on with a project like that with the undercapacity like this.
Well, let's hope High Representative Josep Borrell is listening to this.
He is. I'm sure there will be steps, but it's important to understand across Europe and European nations.
Some European countries' exports to Kazakhstan have miraculously soared, right? And then assets. Is this something we could extract more juice out of? Frozen assets, put them to some good use? What would be your advice on this?
It's been more than 15 months since the beginning of the full-scale invasion, and a lot of talk about confiscation of assets to finance the reconstruction of Ukraine. But nothing's really going down. I don't understand. I mean, all the possible lawyers who have been involved in analyzing this, they already delivered their opinions. So policymakers should gather all that stuff, look at vulnerabilities, policy choices, and make the decision. I mean, again, I just came from a GlobSec forum in Bratislava where we had a big session discussing this issue specifically. And people also from financial institutions like EIB, BRD, they've been saying, look, we cannot wait. It's not like the war ends sometime in the future and then we should begin the reconstruction. It should begin now. The money is needed now. And here it is. I mean, it's Russia's liability. Because we destroyed this large European country. Who else going to foot the bill? And here are assets, plentiful, many of them frozen, but they're not being used to. Sorry, I don't understand this. I think politicians really need to get on the move.
Okay.
And it will be easier to explain to Russian audiences, for us also, that again, this money, yes, they already left Russia, they are already stolen, they are already not here. This is how we can, instead of again taking it inside the country, this is like the best and very fastest choice.
Yeah, so what Natalia is saying is that there was this painful post-Versailles problem with Germany and reparations after World War I. We have we traveled across Russia, we literally shook hands of tens of thousands of people and discussed a lot of things. So Russians consider money which have been siphoned from the country and left Russia as gone. They will not be terribly missing that stuff. So if it's confiscated from some crooks or Russian government to finance the reconstruction of Ukraine, that's a kind of a mutually satisfactory solution. And just the officially recorded capital flight from Russia in the past 15 years was $1.3 trillion. And estimates of the corrupt assets stolen and kept in the West is well over $1 trillion. So there is money.
So let's, we just have 5 minutes and then we will please start thinking your questions because I want to open up for this. let's talk about internally. You mentioned that, Putin is kind of a junta, but also the impression is that never in the history of Russia power has been so concentrated. Even in the Soviet times, there was kind of a collective leadership, right? And Khrushchev could be deposed, or, after the Afghanistan war, there was kind of a, you met Putin. I guess, what do you make of him and the future without him? How would that work? And also, but the first question is he the kind of guy that that at some point could be replaced or removed? By whom? And what is he like in terms of his expectation? I mean, he's not necessarily young anymore.
Was just this question by a person at the GlobeSec forum a couple of days ago, like, you met Putin, how was he? What kind of person is he? When I met him, it was 20 years ago, he was two words, extremely unremarkable. Just this gray FSB operative.
Mediocre.
Mediocre at best, no more, no less. Sorry, let me be straightforward with you.
Yeah.
It's a leader of an organized crime group giving too much absolute power. Mm-hmm. It's the power that drives him, not some sort of unique personality which he does not possess. Give any leader of any organized crime group this level of power and strategic nuclear weapons, and he would behave like that. So that's a classic. So in this regard, we really need to deter these people. We need to show them strength and resilience. That's the language they understand. In terms of who can depose him, Putin, you're absolutely right that that's the level of absolutism we never ever experienced. Never ever. There was always some kind of meritocracy, collective decision making, and so on. What Putin did since the beginning of his rule, he was specifically preparing for any attempts to oust him. One thing, you mentioned Khrushchev. What happened when Khrushchev was ousted, and then the attempt of ousting Gorbachev in August '91? They cut them from communications. Mm-hmm. So what Putin did is he took communications away from FSB, successor of KGB, and transferred them to his personal Praetorian Guard, the FSO, Federal Guard Service. Mm-hmm. So now, not only nobody can cut him off, but he listens to everybody else. And even if FSB doesn't know what's in there, it's the Presidential Guard which decides whether to let them or not get familiar with some of the communications or not. Nobody knows where he is. He's got this multiple residence. It's useless to roll tanks onto the Red Square because he's not there. He's in Valdai, Altai, Bacharov, Ruchey, Novoogarevo, anywhere. You never know. People say, why don't generals depose him? When generals are allowed into a meeting room with Putin, they are being disarmed like a couple of miles away. So everybody is only allowed armless. That's a specific procedure even for top ranked people. So this is, for some people in the West, to get this degree of absolutism is difficult, but that is a reality. I think what we can do in this regard is to continue to weaken his authority. Mm-hmm. So that, like I remember in the 80s, at some point, everybody around started to say, like, down with the Communist Party, no longer. We can't. It's a dead-end situation. They cannot govern, right? So we neared this point in November after Ukrainians liberated Kherson. There was such an outcry on propaganda TV and everywhere, but they stopped just like 1 millimeter short of mentioning him by name. It will happen. Mm-hmm. The whole country sooner or later will start saying, it's this guy. From that on, there's a more straightforward road to change. We don't know. It's difficult. We don't know how it will happen, but we need this first step.
Mm-hmm. Natalia, in your interview today in La Vanguardia, you mentioned also ways of helping organize dissidents within Russia. Mm-hmm. You put together a term which is very Spanish, fifth column. This was invented here in Madrid, quinta columna, and also VPNs, virtual private networks, which is kind of a 20th century and 21st century thing. How can people help from abroad? What should we do in order to empower opposition? Should we help them with VPNs? Access information is maybe the most important thing. Where would you start If you do your shopping list when you discuss with authorities, what is kind of your shopping list of how to help the opposition says that you would want them to deliver?
Well, the biggest thing what we're asking and what is very important is public messaging. It's very important for us, like for years, we were fighting with this regime. We were the first victims of Putin's regime. Not the biggest, Ukrainians are now, but we were the first ones. Putin attacked us first before hacking some, again, Western countries. We were hacked before being repressed. So again, we were like laboratory rats for the Kremlin, and we always are saying that all these internal repressions and external aggressions are two sides of the same coin. We always believed that we are part of the democratic world. We were the first ones to warn about the danger and the true nature of this corrupt, criminal, murderous, brutal Putin's regime. When this full-scale invasion started, there was a lot of narratives in many countries of canceling all Russians. And what we were asking is, please differentiate between Putin's Russia and free Russia, democratic Russia. It's very, very important for us. Don't judge us on the basis of our citizenship or our ethnicity, but judge us only on the basis of our values and of our actions. This is important that you understand that we are the same. We want this also for European choice. And so this support is solidarity. You cannot even imagine how important it is, especially inside Russia, and especially political prisoners and like all those who are like fighting the regime, and they need to understand that again, because it's very easy when you say it's Russia's war, not Putin's war. It's very easy for Putin again to say that again. See, everybody is against us only because we are Russians. So no, we should all say, no, we are against this regime, we're against this dictatorship. And when Russia is a democracy, everybody will be fine with Russians. So this is very important. But also, yes, some like things that we cannot work without work permits. We do need some certainty in our lives so that we know, okay, we are here, we are stable now, our family is fine, we know where kids go to school or kindergarten. Like now we can focus on what we can do best is working with the public opinion inside Russia, trying to have our messages to bigger audiences and things like that, or how help Ukraine do any other anti-war initiative. So this is very important. Plus, we also ask that we are not only those who maybe bring problems to the societies, that we need like visas, we need bank accounts to be opened, and very often just because we are Russians it doesn't happen. It was very interesting that for Free Russia Foundation we could still send wires inside Ukraine and help a lot of initiatives inside Ukraine, but we couldn't to some Eastern European countries because of the name Russia, even it's Free Russia. So, and for many other partners it was the same. Yes, and but we can also be, and we are a very good resource for the Western democracies, because we know Putin's methods better than anybody else. We can always, we are the ones who are exposing all this. It was Russian journalists or activists or investigators who would first uncover factory of trolls or invasion in Eastern Ukraine. It was or anything else, or any interference in this or that elections, or how the Kremlin uses again procedures. It's normal in any country to open a non-profit organization, civil society organization. But when you have some malign interest, like in the US, it was an organization of Natalia Veselnitskaya with the same name as Global Magnitsky Act, with a mission to improve relations between Russia and the United States and to lift the ban for Americans to adopt Russian orphans. But in fact, she was lobbying against Magnitsky sanctions. So, and we are the ones who are uncovering all this and telling, having all these smear campaigns. Again, this smear campaign here against prosecutor Drinda and many other cases like that. Yeah. We know them better.